and a peek into our world and also in our devices and how it's being used. Apart from that, I would also like to introduce everyone, because not everyone on the call is from the devices team. I would like to introduce you to Samir Barye. He's a training manager in IGT Devices international team, and Samir is going to lead these sessions going forward. And as you know, there's 12 sessions. It will be one per month. And again, welcome everyone, and this is the kickoff. Professor Mina, over to you. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Salome, and thank you, Samir. This is a great opportunity for me, and I hope we'll make some sense in this presentation in the future ones. Again, as Salome said, we will take some questions at the end, and if you have any suggestions or questions or things you want to ask me, I'm more than willing to stay. So without any further ado, let's just kick off. Just confirm that you can see my slides.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. So that would be a peek into our world. So I will try and introduce in our first session the Philips Cath Lab, and the word our world is on purpose. So again, it's a great honor and privilege for me to talk with the Philips team. We're great partners with your company, and we feel privileged to demonstrate how we as clinicians use the devices that you guys manufacture and sell across the globe. So let's just kick off with this. That's just another day in the lab. As you can see, this is I've covered the patient faces, but you can see this is how the cath lab works on a regular day-to-day work. I want you to focus on the operator, okay? You will see him working, touching different devices, touching different touchpads, and so on and so forth. There's a nurse in the back, and there's a really large screen here. And I want to say about 12 minutes later, the room looked like that. So a lot of stuff is going on, a lot of devices are getting in. You cannot see a patient. You literally see a lot of people working and trying to save this patient's life, and which we did, and this was a very successful case. So we will return within 40 minutes from now to this case, and by the end of this session, hopefully you'll understand most of the stuff that we see here. So this is our beautiful Azurion 7 Cath Lab. And my aim today is to introduce you to the world of interventional cardiology and the cath labs that you guys all manufacture. So let's go back to the basics. What's a cath lab? What do we call it a cath lab? So cath lab is a catheterization laboratory. And this is why this is an abbreviated phrase being used all over the world. So what's a catheter? So a catheter, and this is from Oxford, this is not from the Hebrew dictionary, this is from the Oxford dictionary. And so a catheter, that comes from Greek, it's a thin tube that is put into the body in order to remove liquid such as urine. So this is only one example for a catheter, but basically a hollow tube that you put inside the body, either to remove fluid or to insert fluid or to extract fluids. We call that a catheter. So we have a long gap between a catheter and a catheterization laboratory. So let's go back to the basics. I'm going to give you some brief history about blood vessels and tubes. So Egyptian, Greeks, Romans, they were all using indwelling tubes into cadavers, and needles were placed in the Hippocrates era to inject water into cadavers to understand the human anatomy and physiology. So that happened really long time ago. William Harvey, that's the guy in the image on the right. He is the one signed under the, not the invention, but the discovery of the blood circulation. So from the get-go, people knew that once they get injured, blood is pouring out of their body, but the fact that it all goes down in a circle was demonstrated by William Harvey, and that happened in the 16th century. So we have our first pillar, blood circulating. All right. Then cardiac catheterization in animals. This is Claude Bernard, the father of modern physiology. So what Bernard and his team did was to insert a mercury tube from the carotid, the vessel inside the horse's neck, to his heart, and they were able to measure pressures. So that was the initiation of what we call today cardiac physiology, how the heart works as a pump, what is the capacity, what is the amount of blood that is being expelled out. And the guy here on the right is not Albert Einstein, although it looks like Albert Einstein. So these guys in the 19th century were the first to measure the intracardiac pressures. Again, putting a tube, a catheter through a horse's neck, all the way down to its heart. Now, in concomitant, in the same century, the 19th century, this is Wilhelm Röntgen. So, and Wilhelm Röntgen is a physicist that invented or discovered, I should say, the X-ray. So let's just talk about X-ray. What is X-ray? So we are all surrounded and use electromagnetic fields, radiation, and waves. Radio waves are huge waves, the size of a building. This is why they have low energy and they can travel really far. On the other hand, if we go to the other end of the spectrum, we have gamma rays and X-rays. These are very short and concentrated high or short wavelength waves. And due to the fact that their wavelength, their sinus is very, 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 very small, it can penetrate through materials. And by that, they don't go far in terms of distance, but they can penetrate through material. This is why they're also considered dangerous. This is why we call X-ray ionizing radiation. Ionizing meaning that they can cause damage to our DNA, but we use it for imaging. So again, 19th century, this is the hand of Röntgen's wife. So if we use this energy, we induce energy to, and we pass energy between two spaces, and there's a material within the space, some of the energy will be absorbed, and some of the energy will just fly through and pass through the material. So this is why here around the finger, you can see that the bones absorbed the radiation and did not pass to the film. While you can see, just a tag, you can see here the skin is semi-opaque. So, and of course the ring, which is metal, the radiation did not pass through. So I'm sure all of you are aware of what X-rays are. Some of you underwent or just saw on movies or maybe on yourself just a pure simple X-ray. So this is what we do when we use X-rays. That basically there's a source of energy at the top or at the bottom, it doesn't really matter. And once we induce and the body sits between two plates, so you have the source of energy at the top, you have the material, the body for that sense, in the middle, and then you have at the bottom some sort of film. Today it's all electronic, but some sort of material that will absorb the energy. And as we said, the energy, the X-ray, the X-rays will have different penetration and will come out as an image on the other side, depending on the density of the material. This is how it really looks like. And this is the image that we get. So I'm sure that all of you have seen a chest X-ray because the air is locked within the lungs. It passes through, all the way through. This is why everything is black, while the bones are white. And again, you can turn and convert the images or convert the colors. And here is the heart. The heart is semi-opaque, okay? Because the lungs, you cannot see anything. You see a lot of bones, but you don't see all those other tissues like skin, muscles, and so on and so forth. So we're at the 19th century. We know about catheters, blood circulation, and now we're using X-rays to demonstrate the inner part of our body. Now we need to connect them both. So this is a very important person for interventional cardiologists or interventionists all over the world. This is Werner Forssmann, and we're now jumping to the 20th century. And this guy was a surgical resident at the Augusta Victoria Hospital in Berlin. And he was the first one to do a venous catheterization. He was he took a urinary catheter, did a nick in his wrist here on himself, I never remember whether these were 2 stories above or 2 stories down to the X-ray lab. And he was taking a picture. Again, what you will see now is the first catheterization made from his left wrist. This little tube goes all the way to his heart. And you can see the heart silhouette, you can see the lungs like we did before, and we're now connecting the two pillars of catheterization, X-ray and tubes. For that, he was kicked out of the Berlin University, again, returning later on to receive his Nobel Prize. So this is a very interesting story about how innovative people are being, mocked when they first do innovative things. But at the end of the road, this guy changed history, and this was, I think, 1959 or something like that. So interventional cardiology, interventional neurology, and interventional radiology, these are all fields of medicine in which we use access, we use either veins or arteries to get inside our body and to treat different diseases, while the interventional neurologists go all the way from the wrist or from the groin to the brain to fix leaks or to extract clots, hence stroke. Or our colleagues from interventional radiology, vascular surgery, do their stuff through other vessels to treat occlusions in the vessels that supply blood to the legs or the arms and so on and so forth. We're very, very humble, and we treat only basically one organ, which is the human heart, which again, I'm definitely not biased, but I feel that this is the most interesting and most fascinating organ in our body. So I'm an interventional cardiologist. As Salome mentioned, I was trained part of the time here in Israel and part of the time in the US. And my main doing during the day relates to interventional cardiology. So let's combine the technology and physics to heart disease. Why do you need to study this history about indwelling catheters and X-ray to treat heart disease? We'll just go back just briefly and discuss what heart disease we are treating. So one of the most relevant and most common disease that we all are aware of is called atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is basically the accumulation of fat deposits in our vessel. And that does not occur within the lumen where the blood flows. It's actually, as you can see now, the fat deposits cross the inner part of the vessel and are being digested by our immune system. And after doing that, our immune system expels or turns into what we call foam cells. So this little foam cells and a lot of other foam cells create a gradual narrowing in the vessel. So again, that does not happen like it happens in our tubes in our house, that we have a lot of junk accumulating, but actually at the vessel wall itself. That could be in the heart, in the vessels that provide blood through to our brains through the neck, or also our legs. So that process of atherosclerosis is the leading process for heart disease, for heart attacks, for strokes, etc. Okay, so this process is not, as some people think, a Western world thing, something that started since we started smoking and to absorb bad water and bad food and so on and so forth. This was actually being demonstrated with mummies that were excavated in Egypt. So this is a study going back to 2013, when they were doing CT and analysis, a microscopic analysis of blood vessels of mummies 4,000 years old and even more, and they demonstrated that this is a human feature. So atherosclerosis, the accumulation of fat deposits within our vessels, is something that we all share in different quantities and really depends on other risk factors. So this is the process that usually governs. So we start our journey with a thin-walled vessel. Atherosclerosis is being accumulated gradually, but in the beginning, the lumen, the inner part of the vessel in which the blood flows, stays not narrowed. The narrowing is relative, but the flow here stays the same until a point in time in which the narrowing contracts the lumen, the space in which the blood flows, and there's a narrowing significant enough to create or to induce symptoms. So this is another way of demonstrating that. So if you cut the vessel, you see a loop or a circle. That's the vessel wall. This is the white is where the blood flows. And you see a little bump here. That's a bump of accumulation of fat. And it could go to two different trajectories. One trajectory is a gradual narrowing of the vessel. So if there's a demand-supply mismatch, while we sit, everything goes well. The amount of blood that's being provided here is enough. But when we exercise, whether a significant exercise or a moderate exercise, the amount of blood that flows through here is not enough. Then the patient starts complaining of chest pain. The other trajectory is an acute trajectory. Here we can see a yellowish tissue, this the gelatinous accumulation of fat, and one day it erupts. Okay, this little tissue is being torn and induces thrombi within the vessels, and that's what happens when you have a heart attack, God forbid. Okay, so if this little accumulation of fat is stable and stays there for years, we're good to go. We need to treat it with time or with meds, but this is a heart attack when the plaque ruptures, induces thrombi, and this is when we are being called to the lab to open this occlusion. Okay, so we're now, just a recap, we've talked about catheters, X-ray, and now the disease that we need to treat. So before we treat the disease, we need to talk about the anatomy. So this is our beautiful heart. I'm sure you all know that there's a left side and a right side, and the left side provides blood to the body through this aorta, a big vessel that supplies blood to the rest of the body. And blood is coming back from the lungs, going to the right side, and then goes back to the lungs, getting oxygenized, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly the circle that Harvey demonstrated. But the heart is a muscle, and this muscle needs its own blood supply. This is why we have those arteries. So the arteries that supply blood to the actual heart are called coronary. So a corona is a crown, because of the fact that the heart is being surrounded by a crown of vessels. We call those vessels coronary arteries. So let me just show you a three-dimensional model of the coronary vessels. And the vessels that you see here on purple, orange, and blue are the way that our blood is getting its supply from the aorta. So although the heart is full of blood, it is not being supplied from its chamber, but it needs its own supply. And when one of these vessels is getting occluded, that's a heart attack. So all the territory supplied by this vessel is being deprived of oxygen, and that causes a heart attack. I'm not showing that just to demonstrate the anatomy, but the fact that if I were to go and try and treat these vessels, you can see that this is a three-dimensional structure. When I take an X-ray, as you saw earlier, when I take an X-ray, when I go backwards, X-ray actually takes all the human body and turns it into a one flat image. So it really depends on which projection I'm taking the image from. So let's say that the patient is lying down. If I do want to see this projection or this projection, I won't be able to ask the patient just turn to the left or turn to the right. This is a patient suffering from a heart attack. I want him to lie still. So I need to find a technical solution, which I will demonstrate in seconds, that will allow me to demonstrate this three-dimensional organ from different angles. And I hope I'm making sense by that. Brilliant. Okay, so we've talked about athero, we've talked about the human anatomy. How do we get there? So again, we're using catheters. How do we get to the actual heart? So we go usually nowadays, we go from our wrist. So we usually puncture the wrist, and I will show you a video soon. And the heart pumps blood through large vessels all the way down to the wrist. So we go against the current. So we make a little nick here in one of the vessels. It's a very, very small nick. After we pull out our equipment, you see like a 1 to 2 millimeters nick in the vessel. We put a little tube, and then we go upwards against the current, and we're using catheters. So these are the modern catheters that we use. These are all pre-shaped. Why pre-shaped? Because we know that the arteries, the coronary arteries, our anatomy is quite similar between different people. So we know that with the relevant catheter, 90% of anatomies are being covered. So we call it cannulation. We go from the groin or from the wrist all the way upwards in the vessels towards the aorta and the heart. We connect our catheter into the ostium, the origin of the vessel, and then we inject dye. Why do we inject dye? The dye allows us to see the vessels, because the vessels now are being full with blood. We cannot see the blood on X-ray, but if we will use an iodine-based contrast, we will be able to demonstrate the flow in the vessel. So we will dilute for a second our blood that flows in the vessels with iodine, and we will be able to show that online and if needed, treat the vessel. So let's just see how that goes. We puncture the vessel in the wrist, as you can see here. This is the radial artery that sits here in our wrist. Once we do that, we have an access to the arterial system of the patient. We put a little sheath in. A sheath is a plastic tube with a one-way valve. So we can exchange our gear without blood being poured out. We advance against the current, because the current goes downwards. We advance the wire, a soft metal wire. So this wire is atraumatic. It wouldn't hurt the vessel. And over this wire, we advanced our catheter. We don't want our catheter just go with the flow there. We just want to give him a direction. And when we do our X-ray, as you can see here, this is just an animation. But if we were able to get our catheter inside, as they did now, inside the vessel, we can inject dye. And once dye is injected, with the pumping of the heart, is being again diluted by blood. But as you can see, there's a blockage here. So again, going back from the wrist all the way up to the heart allows us to cannulate, to put a catheter at the origin of the vessel. And we need to use X-rays and catheters to go all the way up and demonstrate that. Cool. The end game is this image. So this is a live image, of course, recorded, but this is what we see as operators live in your lab. Okay, so this is, you can see the heart beating on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, you can see different projections. Because as we said earlier, if we want to demonstrate this vessel, number 1 here, as a long vessel, we need to tilt the patient downwards and start turning it. And we still need to cover how do we do that on our cath lab, in our cath lab, sorry. And if we tilt the heart towards the other side, we can see vessel number 2 that looks like a line here, but from this trajectory, it looks like a circle. So we take advantage of different angulations in order to demonstrate the vessels. Now, when I said that we're taking X-ray images, this is a movie. This is not an image. For that, actually, every second includes 15 X-ray images. So you remember as kids, we were doing like this little, at the end of our books or notes in school, we're doing a little movie by taking a few pages and do some little drawings and changing the drawings just a little bit just to see that as a movie. That's exactly what we see here. So in order to see the flow live, we use X-ray continuously. So we provide energy all the time, and every second is between 7.5 to 15 images per second. So that's a lot. That's a lot of radiation. But luckily enough, your engineers did so well by decreasing the amount of energy that we use today in comparison to old labs. And today we have a very significant decrease in the amount of energy provided to both the patient and the operator. So again, this is the anatomy that we wanted to demonstrate. We used different projections, which I will show later. And Once we cross, and this is a magnification of, you remember this blockage that we saw, assuming, and we'll discuss that on future meetings, assuming that I know and I saw where the blockage is, I can go inside a vessel with a very thin wire, and I can inflate a balloon that creates a new lumen. So it kind of tends to take all this little fatty deposits to the sides. And if I wish to make sure that this stays in place and does not contract back, I put what we call a stent. A stent is a metal scaffold. This small, very small metal scaffold is being crimped on a balloon. So here you can see a balloon and a stent. And once the balloon is inflated, it inflates the stent, this metal scaffold. And once we deflate the balloon, this can be taken out, and the stent keeps the artery widely patent. And I hope this makes some sense. And then we just go out, and the stent stays there permanently. Stents today are very smart, beyond being, just to get you a feel. This is a, let's say if it's a large vessel, it's a 3 millimeter in diameter and about 15, 20, 38, 40 millimeters in length. Okay, so these are very, very small devices. The engineering here is really top notch, and maybe we will discuss that on our future meeting. So after spending so many minutes talking about catheters and X-ray and heart disease and atherosclerosis and how do you treat those occlusions, now we're at the money time of talking about this beautiful Lab 1 at Shamir Medical Center. That's our Azurian system. So take a look on the left-hand side. That's an old cath lab. So the basic equipment that you need for a cath lab is basically a source of energy. So the source of energy is coming from below. And you have your intensifier that absorbs the energy. And remember that the patient is lying on this table or cath lab bed, which is also can be moved sideways. And all this equipment in the back, which you can hear, microphones. Okay. All the equipment that you can see here was used to demonstrate all the data that was collected by the intensifier. On the other hand, this is a very, very new and beautiful lab. Our lab was established, this lab specifically was installed at 2018. Today you have your flex arm, but basically it looks about the same. But what you see here is basically the same. So you have this table, which you can manipulate and move backwards and forwards. So the patient is static, but you can move the patient with the table. It's a floating table. And this is what we call a C arm. So it shapes like a C. The radiation comes from below and again being absorbed at the top. So let's just see that in a video. So every cath lab, before we go in, I need to show you the control room. Again, this is our lab from the inside. This is the protected glass. When we do our interventions, we have several people with us, and it's a teamwork. So this is the control room for cath lab number 1. So what you can see here, there are different screens for all the machines and the devices that we use. So here on the left-hand side sits the X-ray technologist. So they operate the Philips machine in terms of radiation dose, magnifications, malfunctions, that we have none for it. It's a very, very reliable system. And here we have a biotech. So a biotech is a tech that is responsible on all the well-being of the patient, the blood pressure, the ECG. And in future calls, we will discuss the intrasight and sync vision systems. They are also being used or controlled by our personnel here. I will show you when we were taking the initial video, we're using OneView. So OneView is the system that you see here. OneView is a system that allows us to do our live broadcast, to record events that occur in the lab. We use microphones and beautiful and very efficient cameras in order to collect data, debrief, and of course broadcast our cases to the world. So this is, again, the control room. Now we can go inside. So we'll make a quick tour here. What do we see here? So we will see the C-arm in a second. So this is what we call a CCU boom. This boom has defibrillator. So if something happens and we need to provide current to the patient to reset his heart rate, this is what we have here. And we have different monitors, but basically we have everything on this beautiful large screen here. So when I started working in cath labs, we had 4 to 6 different split screens. Nowadays, we have a multifunctional huge screen that is being controlled by this touch screen here, which I'll elaborate in a second. As you can see, in our lab, we have 2 different touch screens. So I, as an operator, stand here. The patient is lying on this maneuverable floating bed. I have my basic control over the C-arm from this control panel here. And I can move the C-arm to different directions, simulating what we saw here. So in order to get from one projection to the other, instead of moving the patient, all I need to do is change the angle of the C-arm, and we'll see that in a sec. So again, let's just go just a tag forward. We are working in a dangerous radiation-rich environment. So this is why we have protective shields. So the patient is not being covered by this shield because he came for a care. We need to see his body, but the rest of the personnel, including an interventional cardiologist, need to be protected because they actually live in the cath lab in a radiation-rich environment. So we have a huge protection shield that prevents the radiation as much as possible to get to my body. We also have lower shields here. This is the contrast dye injector gun. This is an automatic appliance syringe that being connected to the catheter. And through this syringe, I can inject the dye that we will see in the patient's heart. And again, as we go along, you can see the C-arm. Here at the bottom, that's the origin of the radiation. So the radiation, the X-ray, comes from below. It crosses the patient, collected in this intensifier, and being demonstrated on these screens. And as you can see, this screen is split into 6. I have the image here. This lab is now, of course, not functioning, but you can see that in a second. But this is where I see the image, the live image. This is the hemodynamics, meaning the blood pressure, ECG. We have some auxiliary tools here, and I can also demonstrate what happens on the outside. Let's say that I want to see the patient's echo or other clinical data. The text on the outside can connect the data and just show that on my screen. This knob, when I push it downwards and maneuver or manipulate it forward, backwards, left, and right, it manipulates and moves this floating table. And one important aspect that I will show in a second is the pedal, the foot pedal. So there's a foot pedal here on the floor. You can see that in a second, hopefully. Let's see if I can zoom out, and if not, we'll see it from the top. Okay, so the foot pedal here is the way I control the energy. So we're not taking pictures, or we're not using radiation continuously all the time. That would be very dangerous. Whenever I want energy to be delivered through the system, I just hit the left pedal, and that we call that fluoro, and I see a live image of the patient on the screen. If I want to log what I'm doing, we call that cine. That usually is being used with higher radiation. This is why we use it very rarely. So only when you need to log something important, then you use the middle pedal. And the third right pedal is used to turn off the lights. So that is very effective. Sometimes this whole light-rich environment prevents you from seeing the details on the screen. So you can turn on and off your lights as needed, and there's a dimmer light, and that really creates a very romantic atmosphere in the cath lab. So this is our beautiful cath lab. Another way of demonstrating that's the same cath lab from a different perspective. I was just showing, trying to turn the lights on and off, but this is our cath lab from our one view system. So you can zoom in, zoom out from, I actually can do that. So let's say that I'm on call or someone else is on call, and there's an issue in the lab or a debate. and the operators want to show me something, so I can log in to the system from home and share my thoughts with the team and vice versa. The cabinets in the back include all the catheters and stents. And now you will see Nurse Asi is coming into the room to prep the room for morning rounds and work. You see all the necessary meds here, the special light that we use in our lab. These long cabinets use or are for storage of catheters, and the library here are for the different stents. And again, you can get a feel, you can see the Windows logo here, you can get a feel of what is being displayed on our monitors. This is a second angle of our cameras. Again, if I wish to see or help the personnel in the room, we can also do that in our beautiful cath lab. So if you were to go to any cath lab around the world, you will see that the setup is similar. Cabinets, screen, table, C-arm, operator. Of course, they're not wearing lead at the moment. And basically, if I'm proctoring or being invited as a guest to any cath lab in the world, especially if it's a Philips lab, I feel very comfortable. So I was trained with Philips lab, and again, this is what I have. And my education for manipulating other devices is very, very slim. But basically, if you come from one cath lab to the other, you'll see and you'll feel comfortable, as opposed to operating rooms and theaters. So I want to give you some feel of why do we like and why people around the world like the systems that you guys are manufacturing. So this is a quick video demonstrating, hopefully it will work. Let's see. Yeah, so this is the way to demonstrate the flexibility of the Azurian system. So remember, I wanted to demonstrate different projections of the heart. So to get that, and you can see the screen running here, to get that to get an image from a different projection, all I use a little knob. And the good thing about the system that it really moves fast. So if I want to go from looking at this vessel as a long vessel, or looking at this vessel as a C-shaped artery to a line-shaped artery, the fact that the C-arm moves so fast really saves time. And again, it has detectors to prevent hitting the patient. You can see the hemodynamics on the screen. It's very, very flexible. It gives you the ability as a single operator to operate this whole show by yourself. Okay, so that's the C-arm. And again, just to demonstrate the control module, this is a very simplified manner of demonstrating how the knobs, the different tools that you have, are so easy, and are also Philips engineers used light in it. So this big knob here, when you put your hand, you can move the table back and forth, left and right. You can put your C-arm in and out. This V sign you use, I will show the touchscreen in a second, but with this V sign, when you hit it, it just goes to a designated safe projection. So let's say I'm doing a procedure and I wish to go from what we call one projection to the second projection, short axis, long axis. I just hit the V sign and the touch screen. And again, I can manipulate the whole system by myself, which is a great, great, great advantage. This knob actually controls, and it has 4 directions, and it goes from left to right, anterior, posterior. And one important feature that Philips added, and we use that frequently as needed, one thing that we use is the tilt of the table. Remember that we are treating sick patients, and at times, God forbid, at times they crash, and we need to go to a resuscitation session. So let's just imagine, if we go backwards, that the patient is within this C-arm, and anesthesiologists and other team members from the CCU are coming to help us. If the patient is sitting within the C-arm, it will be impossible to assist him and start resuscitation. The knob that you see here, and I will show it again in a second, okay. So while you can use this knob and turn it for a few seconds, and then the whole table pivots. Once the table with the patient pivots laterally, it goes out of the C-arm, and then all this resuscitation stuff can come in without interference of the C-arm and take care of the patient. This is a major advantage of the Azurian system. And one of my, again, this is, I'm a control freak, I'm being honest here. So for me, to get all the data that I need for operating the system from one touchpad is the leap I was looking for. I mean, for me, just the fact that I can control the numbers of frames per second, the different projections, I can analyze, and you can see that in a second, I can analyze anything, go from one projection to the other. This is just an example, but again, you can see that the operator is operating it from the control panel, then goes to a different mode, and everything is so streamlined through the procedure, and it really gives you the ability to do things by yourself. Then your staff can do something else and keep the patient safe. Before we had that, everything that this operator touches, I need to ask from my technologist to do. Now I can do everything from my end. You see that the operator here is using this V button to go from one projection to the other, and this is how he moves the patient with the floating table. So we're getting to the end of our session. So now I hope you know, and you can realize that now Dr. Litovchik was touching the touchpad. So he's changing mode on his system. He's holding a catheter in his hand and is advancing a wire, as we saw. So this is the patient's wrist, as you can see here. This is the cover, the protection shield that prevents radiation coming from the system towards the operator. Be advised that we are wearing between 8 to 10 kilograms of lead all day to increase our protection. This is definitely not far from being a fun part of our job. The live data is being presented here. The hemodynamics, blood pressure, and everything is being presented here. And now what you can see is actually doing the beginning of the case. This is the dye injection system. So he's now advancing. You can see a little tube here. He's holding the wire on his right hand, advancing the catheter. And again, just demonstrating that process again. Everything is, he can see his wire advancing, live image, using the pedal, okay, on his screen, advancing the catheter from the wrist all the way to the heart. The nurse is administering drugs. You have a long catheter waiting here on the table, and you saw him touching the screen to change by himself as a single operator all the different definitions for the system. 12 minutes later, so this patient was crashing and burning, as we said. We're now the second tip. This is me here, and this is the CCU director. What we're doing now is an example of a teamwork. This patient went into a cardiogenic shock. So my team and the CCU team are working from the groin concomitantly with the team that are working from the wrist. Both of us are looking at this huge screen. All the support team is in the lab, okay? The patient is completely stable, okay? Although it's a cardiogenic shock patient, and you can see that what Dr. Marcus is holding in his hand is that looks like a gun, is the device that inflates a balloon. So they have all the equipment. We're discussing while Dr. Litovchik is fluoroing, so we can see exactly what we're doing. Everyone is up to speed, and you will see in a second they're inflating a stent. See, we're doing everything, and now with the use of the control panel, they will deploy a stent, and we will discuss all this part of stent implantation and support in our meeting in the future. So as you just saw, he was using the knob, the big knob, to turn or just to change the patient's position. And in a second, Dr. Marcus will inflate a stent that he's holding in his hand. So basically, now you can see the CR moving, the patient moving. So all the issues and all the stuff that we were discussing in this chapter, from the catheter to atherosclerosis, X-ray, trajectories, projections, moving the patient, that gives you a feel, hopefully you get a good feel of what we do in the lab, how this Philips Azurian system helps us doing things during our work in the lab in a streamlined way. And everything is very, very close to our hands and eyes. And hopefully you get a good sense of belongingness. And I think you all should be proud of the system that you work in. So our first session recap, we've talked about the use of catheters, how to access blood vessels, the use of X-ray to demonstrate various tissues, and with the assistance of iodine to visualize blood vessels. We've talked about athero and coronary artery disease, and most importantly, the basic cath lab setup. The table, the moving bed, the C-arm, the screen, and we saw some examples of interventional cardiology in action. So we have about 13 minutes left, and I really look forward to get your questions. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor Mina. It was really, really very good education, even for me. I've learned new things today from with regards to where it started, because I think on our side, we always just jump into Andreas Grunzig. So it's really, the floor is open for anyone that have a question for Professor Mina. You can please just unmute yourself and ask the question. Can anyone unmute themselves?
Salome, can
Yes.
you unmute Philip and Anastasia, because they're not able to speak? I think you are the host, so you only can do it.
No, Professor Sarmina is actually the host.
Oh, okay. So let me take over. Let me take over that. I think I will reclaim and then I can do it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Philip, you have a permission now to speak.
Can you, good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello, Professor Mina. It was an amazing and very interesting session you gave. I was wondering whether you will be explaining how the hemo system links in to the Azurion and Intrasight.
The hemo?
Yes.
Hemodynamics, you mean?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you basically have Philips hemodynamic system, you have other vendors. At the end of the day, you decide which data comes on your screen. So under the bed, you have a console with all the relevant sensors for hemodynamics. And that connects to the biotech that you saw in the control room and to the system through this little tube that we said that we called it the automatic injector. So some labs are using manual injectors, and we use an automatic injector, but that needs to be connected to the hemodynamic. So let's talk just a tag about hemodynamics. So basically, those systems log ECG. So you have few stickers, over the patient logging the rhythm. Okay, so that's one data. And another source of data is the pressure of the tube that you have in your catheter. So assume that we went from the wrist all the way to the heart. I have a tube full of pressure. And then we connect this to the injection system, and not in parallel, but actually in line, somewhere in the middle, there's a sensor of pressure, a fluid sensor-based pressure, or fluid-based sensor based on pressure. So whenever the pressure increases, it kind of gives a little bump to the sensor, and that translates to a waveform. So if my catheter touches a vessel wall and there's no flow, I will see a straight line. If my catheter is coaxial with the vessel, then there's a flow, and since the blood pressure is in a sinus mode, I will be able to see that on the screen. So when the patient is not doing well and crashes, the blood pressure drops. The biotech on the outside says, low pressure, I need to take care of that, of course. And also, again, every data that we have is being logged for medical purposes. So if a patient has an arrhythmia or some sort of other medical emergency, our biotech from the control room can log that, and this issue can be addressed later on. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Rand, even you're allowed to talk for your question. Rand, you can unmute yourself. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, also thought it was very interesting, this presentation. And one interesting part was when you were discussing the 10 kilograms of lead that each operator needs to wear, and of course you're doing surgeries throughout the day. As we've made advancements in how much radiation is emitted from our systems, does that mean in the past you used to wear more? And in the future, do you hope to get to a day where you wear no lead and can just safely live in the cath lab without any exposure here?
Yeah, so it's an issue. I can tell you that unfortunately, so as you probably could have watched us working, our brain is not protected, our hands are not protected. This is why the clarity system was a major advance. So this advancement made us feel more comfortable in the lab, but it does not prevent us from wearing lead. We're not there yet. There is still a very significant amount of emission. And concomitantly, the regulator requires us to wear a thicker lead. The standards have changed, unfortunately. So some materials that were approved in the past, they were lighter to absorb radiation, are now not allowed. So actually, we're not going backwards. We're not going forward. We're actually going backwards in that sense. So there are different solutions to that. Our EP colleagues, electrophysiology colleagues, are using a protection mounted on the ceiling. So they have it looks like I don't know if you've seen that, like RoboCop, like a really huge barrel of protection. So they hide themselves behind the barrel, and just through a little holes they push their hands. This mount is nice. I feel we move as an interventional cardiology, move a lot in the room. We're more hectic than EP. So for us, technically, it's not really working. There are also some startups, and I know for sure about an Israeli startup that actually what it does, it concentrates the radiation within the beam. So it kind of like a robotic arm that goes around the patient between the C-arm and the patient. I don't remember the name of the company. And their premise that they had their test in our lab too, their premise that you will be able to do your cases in speedos. I'm not sure it's good for the patient, but I'm not sure that the industry is going towards this way. But if we will get to the point where we can do our cases without lead, that would be awesome. Frankly, I don't see that happening in the close time.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that background.
Any more questions? I guess no question. So it was really simplified language, so probably everybody received what you said.
So I encourage this dream
Yeah,
team to ask and to
yeah.
reach out to you. And maybe there's
There is one
some,
question
yeah, go. Yep.
from Felix.
Yeah.
Felix,
I
please
hope you
go ahead. Yeah.
I hope you can hear me. I'm
Yes.
on the road. Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. This really gives a good feedback on what we see every day and what you do every day. A question just came up to me. We see more and more physicians demanding solutions that are wireless. For example, there's wire companies that are our competition. They work with wireless solutions. But do you see any advantages in it? Because you've highlighted a lot of advantages in integrated control functionalities like the touch screen. But do you see any additional advantages in having more wireless solutions, or even physicians, mainly in university hospital, they always ask, when are we going to have voice-controlled labs? Is this like science fiction, or is it something that would add really a value for you?
Well, you know that interventionalist, I think that every physician that works in this arena is I would say that he is an early adapter. So whenever I felt comfortable in the old lab until I got this beautiful Azurian system. Now, when I go to a different lab, especially if it's a system, again, I'm completely honest and biased. The Philips is my go-to from my training. So when I go to a different lab, how do you guys work? Just so many buttons to push. So I feel that every time you put another gadget in, it makes a lot of sense. I was talking to our IT about a week back because of all the wires that we have at the bottom of the table, and sometimes it could be risky. So I do see some sense for wireless apparatuses, as if that could be said like this. The only caveat that I see, and you know that many labs have purchased the wireless pedal. You're probably familiar with the wireless pedal, but you know that I'm using the wired one. You know why? Because everyone forgets where the batteries are. So it seems like a stupid thing, but in a really large hospital, I'm not going to mention the name of the hospital, they were doing a case with a wireless one. And you know that they had, usually the system gives you a feedback, really, you know, it gives you a feedback that the battery is about to run out and so. But at the end of the day, this is something that could be a bit of a challenge. I do see a great advantage in the wireless technology that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of your second question, of course. So if you have any voice control, listen, when I'm sometimes I need to hold two objects in my hand. If I now need to take one of my hands in order to operate the C arm, and the tech is not available to do that for me, let's say that I had the option to say Siri or Philips or whatever, say something, do an LAO, codal RAO, whatever, and that could be a good leap. Yeah, sure. I would use that.
Okay.
Good. We are on the hour, so maybe I can close this meeting.
Okay.
Firstly, I want to thank you again, Samir, for putting all of this together, and I'm really looking forward to the future programs that you're going to lead. I want to thank all the attendees for the time that you've taken to come to our education series. Looking forward to have you on the next one as well. I believe the follow-up from here, Samir, would be that you would send the link of the recordings to all the attendees from school as well. And then last but not least, Professor Mina, I really want to thank you so much. I think very well explained. We all have a very good understanding, and I think people really have a peek into our world. So I also wish you a good weekend. I think your weekend already started in Israel. And until the next time, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you very much, and see you again in the next webinar. But in between, we will have a couple of calls and even the explanation. Thank you.